Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Didn't sleep all night?
No, I had a call at 1 o'clock in the morning
Oh my gosh.
from Brazil.
Yeah, this is for you, Hananel. You weren't here yesterday.
Some postponed tomorrow.
No. We have tomorrow a different quiz.
No.
Ah! Zat Hashem. Okay, let's go. No time to waste. Pass these out.
Oh.
This one for you. Pass them all out. So Hananel, yesterday we studied this page with the nine lines, 9 points, and we realized that there's 39 words. And so now you were supposed to learn all these words for today. So you can definitely do it with your open book. This page, Hananel, has all the answers. The translations, it's all on this page. So you can do it now while everybody's working. You could do it, and we're going to review it, of course, afterwards to discuss.
What are we supposed to do?
Translate. Do you need a pen?
No.
Best not. Only for Hananel because he wasn't here.
I didn't understand.
Translate each word in the list
Translate it
into English or into Swedish, if you like. Translate here. There's a word. It's Hebrew. All these are Hebrew or Hebrew words. Yeah, it's all Hebrew, I think. Maybe there's Aramaic. I'm just looking to see. Yeah, there's one Aramaic word, 2 Aramaic words. Most of it is Hebrew, but it's Hebrew that we use. And so next to each word, write the translation into English, if you can.
Oh.
If you want to look at your notes, by all means, look at your notes.
In Hebrew.
Right, it's written in English letters, but it's a Hebrew word. It's written out in English, but it's actually, right, the word Torah shebichtav. What does that mean in English?
Written Torah?
The written Torah. So write down the written Torah. The answer is the written Torah. Translate. Yeah, translate. It's the written Torah, exactly. Yeah. See, I already got one. Yes, I'm gonna just stop stop it until we get going. I didn't stop it. Nope. Surprisingly, not Remez and not Pshat. That I think is what distinguishes traditional Judaism from other readings of the Torah. You try to read the Torah only with Pshat, you're gonna stop very quickly. Very hard to understand the Torah if we don't have the third type of interpretation called Dirash or Drasha. And that's the entire Talmud is full of how the rabbis read the Torah. Not only the literal meaning, not only the hints and the mystical side, that's not so much in the Talmud, it's more in the Kabbalah, but primarily through drasha, analyzing and deriving things from the way the Torah was written. So it's a perush through drasha. There's actually a modern version of the word darash, a modern usage. But here we're going, the classic usage is the 13 midot she'Torah nidreshet bahem. Nidreshet is to derive things from the Torah. Modern word usage is when a rabbi gets up to speak in shul on Shabbat, he gives a drasha, a public address. It's the same word, but it doesn't have the original connotation of deriving a type of interpretation. It's a type of public address, a drasha. That's a new meaning to the word drasha. But in the classic texts, midrash comes from the word to derive things. Midrash is we have it later. We have interestingly, number 11 and 12 are categories called halacha and agadah. Basically, it's the legal material and everything else. Agadah is everything else. That's 11 and 12. You with me?
Tradition.
So there's legal traditions. In number 11, halacha is legal, law,
Legal.
traditions, and agadah, number 12, is other traditions. Anything else but law. What does it include? History, beliefs, that's right. There's two books from the period of the sages. We're going to get to that soon, right? The period number 4. The central period of the Torah's development. No, 1 second. The central period, there are two books written, two types of books written. One is called Midrash Halacha. See what I'm doing here? Putting together number 8 and number 11 on your page. See number 8 and number 11. We have the word midrasha, midrash, and we have number 11 is halacha, midrash halacha. So that's a collection where they primarily focus on deriving things from the Torah in the legal realm, about laws. There's another book called Midrash Agadah that's putting together number 8 and number 12. Midrash Agadah. That's deriving things from the text, not about law, but about the history, about the beliefs. Many people don't know what I just told you now. When you ask people, what is Midrash? Automatically they think it means Midrash Agadah. Stories. Exactly. It's not precise. Midrash comes from the word to derive. It's the way to derive. It's number 8. It's a type of interpretation of the Torah. It's the way to read the Torah by deriving things from it. It's almost like we mine the text to find the diamonds from the way the Torah was written. And it's both in legal parts of the Torah and in the non-legal parts of the Torah. We also mine the text of the stories and derive things from the way the Torah describes them. Midrash Agadah, but there's also Midrash Halacha. By the way, number 10, you guys all know from the Sidur, Rabbi Yishmael Omer b'shlosh esrei midot haTorah nidreshet bahem. 13 ways of Rabbi Yishmael. Those are 13 principles of derivation of legal material. There's another set of principles of derivation when it comes to Agadah. Yeah? And there's other lists, other ways of deriving things, both in Agadah and in Halacha. Lots and lots of derivations. Midrash is the classic way. The sages, they were involved in Midrash. Not so much reading the Torah according to Sod, or at least it remained secret for a long time. But other books read the Torah and give it a perush al derech, that means on the way of Sod. We can give you an example of a book who is a perush on the Torah, al derech hasod, by the way, through the means of not the pshat interpretation, and it's not a drash, meaning derivation. It's not a midrash halacha, it's not drash al pi halacha, it's not drash al pi agada, it's drash al pi asod. Deriving things from the Torah, reading a perush al derech asod. Zohar, you might have heard of. The Zohar. It's a commentary on the Torah. Right? It's a way of reading the Torah. It's an interpretation of the Torah. But it's according to the mystical tradition. The Sod, that's many times called. The mystical secrets. Number 9 is mystical secrets. Sod. Word means secret in modern Hebrew. In the context of the way of interpreting the Torah, there's 4 ways to interpret the Torah. You see it on the page. Pardes, pay. Pay stands for Pshat. Pshat means the simple reading. Reish stands for Remez, which is a secret. Dalid is for Drasha, right? And Samech stands for Sod. This spells out Pardes, which means an orchard. An orchard. Pardes is an orchard.
This is the one that Rabbi Kiva get into, right?
So actually, the word Pardes became associated primarily with Sod, with the secret interpretations of the mystical secrets of Judaism. But it's also used as the 4 types of interpretation, of Perush. Interpretation. Or Perush. 4 types of Perush, 4 types of interpretation. So number 5 is the general term. 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the 4 types. Okay, let's go on. Halacha Agada, we did number 13. Some of you didn't know what it means. Number 13. Number 13 on the page. Emunah, Machshava, Ashkafa. I'm looking for an English word for that. I have enough 3 Hebrew words already. What's the English word? How do you translate that? You say beliefs. You say beliefs. Yeah. Emunah or Machshava or Ashkafa. 3 different ways to say the topic. It's a topic, not a legal topic, but the beliefs of Judaism. Emunah means faith, Machshava means thought, and Ashkafa means perspective or philosophy. They're interchangeable words. They all talking about the part of Judaism which is not legal. Sort of another way of saying Agadah. Right? But it's philosophy of Judaism, the beliefs of Judaism, the perspectives of Judaism on spiritual realm. Is that clear? Yeah?
Is Agada and Agada is the same, is it?
It's interesting. No. One is an aleph. Agada. And what you know, the word that it's not the same thing as Haggadah. Haggadah, we know, is the word used on Pesach. For Haggadah Shel Pesach. It comes from the pasuk that says that you must tell to your sons the story of the Exodus. So, V'higadeta levincha, with a hey. This is Agadah. Agadah, it means the beliefs but it's not. It's also the historical parts. It's not exactly the same as Emunah, Machshava, Hashkafa, because Agada includes all types of interpretations of the non-legal parts or non-legal interpretations of the Torah. Okay? So far so good?
Yeah.
Kabbalah is the mystical tradition of Judaism. Musar is ethics. Machloket, disputes, arguments. Rov is not, don't tell me it's a rabbi. Rav is a rabbi. Rov is a majority. Samchut. Samchut, the word means authority. Now what I'm going to teach you, B'ezrat Hashem, today, what I started to teach you already, is that they are layered. Jewish history, we look at it, and we see that there are different periods with various levels of authority. The way to think of it, maybe the best way is, the closest you are to Sinai, the more authority you have. And farther away from the giving of the Torah, the less authority we have. So today we have less authority than the period of the sages. The period of the sages, Sinai is one instance, of course. The closest to Moshe Rabbeinu is the most authority that you could have. Moshe's authority was defended by God himself in 2 weeks ago, Parsha, from his brother and sister, right? And this week from Korach. So the authority of Moshe is greater than anybody else. But the second level of authority is the sages. The sages in the period number 4, 1,500 years after Moshe Rabbeinu. 1,000 years after Moshe Rabbeinu. They have tremendous authority when it comes to describing to us the mitzvot and the legal system of Judaism. The first time that it gets written down, there was always oral Torah, giving traditions, but it's the sages who really crystallized it into Judaism, into a system that we know of it today. The laws of Shabbat, the laws of Shofar, the laws of Trumot and Masrot, and how to tithe and kosher, all those laws gelled into a legal system in the Second Temple period and after. We're going to get to that today. Anyways, so the samchut, the authority, we're going to see today, later today, that there's different layers of authority. But the word itself means authority. Okay, samicha is, you all know what that means in modern Hebrew. There's another meaning in modern Hebrew. It's important to know. More in the winter time than in the summertime. When the winter time comes, you find yourself going to the store, said, I need an extra blanket. Smicha is another word for blanket. In modern Hebrew, smicha means a blanket. But in our context, of course, it means rabbinic ordination.
Yes, my roommate says the door said, Israel said, this means blanket. What do you mean?
That's a blanket, that's it. You were asking for help there. Okay. Different context. It has a different meaning. Number 20, mitzvot are commandments. Din is a law. Gezerah, right, it's a prohibition by the sages. It's still there from yesterday, Gezerah, negative enactment. Or, another word, better way of saying that is a rabbinic prohibition. better rabbinic prohibition. The way I wrote it this time is because it's positive versus negative. But what is a negative enactment? It means a prohibition. So rabbinic prohibition is gezerah. Din d'Rabbanan is a positive enactment that the sages instituted that you must do. Okay, what are we up to? Number 23. Did you get 22? Yeah, everybody with me? Hananel, you with me? Do you understand what gezerah is? Sure, of course. You can ask 10 questions.
What about the market? You know, if I'm not mistaken, only the Messiah will settle all these things about the market.
I heard that too. It could be. It could be. There's an idea that not so much Mashiach, but Eliyahu. There's a phrase in the Talmud which many times is used. It's these letters. Teku. Teku. It's usually the way it's pronounced. It means, in Aramaic, the simple interpretation means the matter stands. Usually it's unresolved. We don't know what the law is. When I was in 3rd grade, or 4th grade, started to learn Talmud, and my Rabbi taught me, this stands for Tishbi Yetaretz. Kuf is Kushiot, and Vav is Ve'aba'ayot, which means Tishbi means Eliyahu HaTishbi. It's a nickname for Eliyahu, the prophet. When he comes and reveals himself at the end of days, he will yetaretz, he will resolve difficult questions and issues which we have no resolution for. So there are some things in the Gemara where we say teku. Teku means it stands unresolved. And there's a tradition that Eliyahu will come and resolve all those unresolved questions, things which we couldn't decide about. So usually you have a machloket. Sometimes the machloket gets decided. How does the machloket dispute get decided? Number 17.
Majority.
Right? The people, the rabbis in the Sanhedrin would take a vote. And you decide the law based on the majority. Sometimes they didn't decide. Sometimes it was equal, exactly. And they left unresolved. So those things, maybe Eliyahu will come. Mashiach will know all the answers to everything, and he will solve them. There is such a tradition, you're right. But for now, there are many things which remain in dispute. And we either follow the majority, or if you have a community tradition, you follow that community tradition, even though it could be a machloket. Yeah.
One more question.
They have to pay extra. Yeah.
Talmud Babylon or Talmud Jerusalem, which one is greater?
It's like asking me, who do you love more, your mother or your father? You can't answer such a question.
Mother.
No, I can't say that.
Oh, yeah.
Who do you like better, this child or that child? You can't say such a thing. However, in Jewish tradition, the Babylonian Talmud gained prominence. It became more prominent. It was more developed and more studied, and it became much more accessible because of all that, and therefore it has a greater role in the Jewish tradition than the Yerushalmi Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, or the Talmud of the land of Israel. It's a little bit ironic. The land of Israel is the most central, but in history, at that point of time, in the period of the sages, the end of the period of the sages, the community in Israel could not function any longer, and the center of Torah study moved to Babylon. And that's why the Jerusalem Talmud is less prominent than the Babylonian Talmud. Babylonian Talmud became the central Talmud. Is that clear, Hanana? Another question? You're going to really have to pay double this time. No, that's I can go on? No, I will. Yeah, I give you for free, really. Another question? Because you weren't here yesterday, but we'll talk more about it soon. We actually didn't talk much about the books yesterday. Just mentioned it a little bit. Let's go. Let's finish this page, and then we'll go on to the next side. Number 20, mitzvot din gezerah 23, aseh and lo taseh. What's 23? 23
is commandment.
Yeah, but what's the difference between 23 and 24? What's 24? Lo ta'aseh. Lo ta'aseh is going to be a negative commandment. Right?
Negative.
And aseh, number 23,
Negative.
is positive. 23 is positive. Aseh, do. Aseh means to do. Act. Aseh. And lo ta'aseh, do not act. So 23 is positive and 24 is negative commandments. How many commandments are there in the Torah? Hananel, how many commandments are there? Biblical commandments do we have? How many do we have? What's the sum total number of commandments in the Torah? Nope. Sum total? 613, right? You've heard that number before? So part of those are positive commandments and part are negative commandments. How many positive? 248. And how many negative commandments? You do the math. 365. You don't have to do the math because how many days in a year? 365. And what's the hint to the 248?
Limbs.
The number of limbs in the body, according to their sages' count. Anyways. Okay, so that's a positive and negative commandments. The Oraita and the Rabbanan, this is the Aramaic terms. 25 and 26. The Oraita means biblical. Oraita is another word of Torah. It's the Aramaic way of saying Torah. Torah means instruction. Oru. Oraita is to instruct. The Oraita is from the Torah. And the Rabbanan from Rabbanan, rabbis, from the rabbis. A rabbinic law or rabbinic issue is called the Rabbanan. Minhagim are customs. So you could say like this. I want you to tell me, Yisrael, 3 levels, 3 types of obligations. You can have an obligation on 3 levels. The most severe level, what would you say is the most serious obligation in Judaism? When you say a law is, that's an example of a type of law which is from the Torah. There's 613 laws from the Torah, right? Biblical laws. Number 25, biblical laws, the Oraita. Then there's thousands and thousands of rabbinic law. the rabbinic law. That's a second level of obligation. We have to do them both. We do all the biblical laws as much as we can, and all the rabbinic laws as much as we can, right? What's an example of a biblical law, Eob? Tefillah? Tefillin. According to the Rambam, tefillah is a biblical law. According to others, it's not. But tefillin, it says in the Torah. Good. What's an example of a rabbinic law?
Shabbat, lighting Shabbat candles.
Lighting Shabbat candles. Good. What's another example of a rabbinic law? Hananel. Kiddush on Shabbat. Correct. The way we make kiddush on a cup of wine is rabbinically instituted. The concept of actually mentioning Shabbat is biblical, but it comes from the word zachor Yom Shabbat in the Torah. But you're right, the kiddush on a cup of wine is a rabbinic obligation, like the lighting of the candles. What's another rabbinic obligation? About something else, not Shabbat. Say again, what? Netilat yadayim, the washing of the hands before bread. Very good. And in the morning, rabbinic obligation. Good. What's another? Yisrael, give me another example of a biblical law. One of the 613 commandments. I assume you know a few of them. Eob said tefillin is one example. It says in the Torah you have to put on tefillin every day. What's another example? Shacharit is not really from the Torah. I mean the prayer in general, but Shacharit that you have to daven 3 times a day is a rabbinic. What else? What other mitzvot do you know of? He's giving you a hint. He's tzitzit, right? Wearing tzitzit. We read it in last week's parsha. You should put tzitzit on the corner of your mezuzah. That's a good example. Good. Haranel, give me another example of a biblical commandment. Say what? Respect your father, mother, and father. Very good. Part of the 10 Commandments. It's definitely written in the Torah, right? Good. Give me another example of a rabbinic commandment. Blessings, most of them. Good, except for Birkat HaMazon. That's a rabbinic obligation. Good. So we have 2 levels. You understand what I'm showing you? The biblical level and the rabbinic level. There's a 3rd level of obligation. Customs. That's right. We have to keep the customs too. Let me give you an example of a custom. To recite to recite Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, it's not the rabbi's institution that we say Hallel. We say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh because it's a custom that was developed in Bavel. Kippah is a custom. It's a custom, yeah, of much more recent times. It's not as ancient as the Talmud. There's certain individuals in the Talmud there says that they always wore a head covering, but it didn't become common practice till the last few hundred years. Kippah is a custom. Good. What other examples do you know of customs?
The waiting for the between milk and meat.
Yeah. Well, there's custom about how long. There's different customs. How long you have to wait after eating meat before you can have milk. That's a good example. Because there is a law, not a custom, halakha, on the biblical level that you're not allowed to eat meat and milk together. And then there's a rabbinic stricture which defines you have to wait a certain amount between eating milk and meat. And how much? That's the third level. How many hours is the custom of 6 hours, the custom of 3 hours, right?
But the 3 hours is who?
It really got popular in England.
Oh.
English Jewry for hundreds of years kept 3 hours. But it's not a very well sourced custom, but the source is the community, English community in England. They have a custom. It's mentioned in some of the Rishonim, but it's a weaker custom than the 6 hours. 6 hours is already discussed. They have differences on all three levels. Very few differences when it comes to a din deoraita. But when it comes to dinim derabanan, there are some different interpretations. And also when it comes to customs as well. It's not all customs. Majority of it is customs. But for example, there's laws of kosher, laws of shechita, laws of Pesach. Those are biblical mitzvot. And we see there's differences between the way the Ashkenazi poskim, the Decisors, speak about them, and how they rule in certain questions, and Ashkenazim, how they rule on these questions. So there's differences not only in custom, but for the most part, it's custom. The differences of custom. But there are some differences in actual laws of rabbinic laws, and even regarding biblical laws. There's differences. Okay, we're up to number 27 is minagim, means customs. Number 28, edot, ethnic communities. Eda is a community. Sfaradim, edot HaMizrach. Sfaradim means Spain, right? So Spain, North Africa. Edot HaMizrach, the eastern communities. Edot, again, you have the word in 28 and in 30. The community that were more eastern. Then Europe, Ashkenazim are from Europe, Teimanim from Yemen. Lechatchila and b'diavad. What does lechatchila mean? Right, so there's a few interpretations, right? What do we have here? We have a few interpretations here. The ideal performance, the way it should be done, if all other things are equal. Ideally, if you have all the ideal conditions, it should be done in this way. Lechatchila. And therefore, another word of saying it's the goal, what we're aiming for. Literally, it's the first choice, or the starting position. Techila means the beginning. The starting position. So if you ask me what's the law, I can give you the law on two levels. I can give you the halacha lechatchila. Lechatchila, you should say every word in the Siddur of Psukei de Zimra, from start to finish. Lechatchila. Ideally, that's the performance, that's the way it should be done. B'diavad means a minimal fulfillment. Now sometimes, literally, it means after the fact. But the fact could be even before you said your Psukei de Zimra. The fact, which is on the ground, is that you're trying to catch up with the community. So you're in a situation where you pray slower and the community prays faster. So the situation is b'diavad. And so the halacha that I'm going to tell to you, as I taught you, is not the ideal performance, but b'diavad. In this circumstance, the proper halacha is to skip certain sections. So it's still kosher, you're fulfilling the law, but it's a minimal fulfillment. It's an acceptable fulfillment. It's not the ideal. But in this, sometimes when the situation changes, you're not in an ideal world. So then you could say it that for this situation, this is the best way to do it. So it's lechatchila in a b'diavad situation. Right? You're supposed to skip some sections to make sure that you can pray together with the community because there's different values that you're trying to uphold. So it might be the lechatchila halacha in a b'diavad, usually in b'diavad situation. Usually we just say that's the b'diavad. The b'diavad halacha is that you just say the Baruch Shamar Ashrei Nishtabach, so that you can catch up. That's the minimum. B'diavad halacha.
So one other example is like candling Hanukkah in olive oil instead of wax, candle wax.
It's interesting. Every time you discuss the law, the halacha, you have to be careful. Is it lechatchila b'diavad? It's saying something is b'diavad, meaning it's not ideal performance. So I don't think it's true. I think it could be totally lechatchila to use wax.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with using wax. It doesn't say in the halacha that you must use olive oil. If you don't have olive oil, you can use wax. No, that's not the way the halacha was decided. There was an opinion like that. It's in the Mishnah. That was the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, one of the Tanaim, but it was not accepted. The rabbis didn't say you must have olive oil. The rabbi said all the oils are kosher. Any type of oil, sesame seed oil or soya oil or any oil you make out of anything is kosher.
Even animal fat.
Even lechatchila, even animal fat. Lechatchila, anything that burns well. There's a few exceptions that don't burn well and they make a smell, so those are not allowed. But all the oils are kosher. That's kosher lechatchila. They're all considered to be part of the ideal performance. Now, someone today who says, I want to light with olive oil because we're rich. We live in the land of Israel. There's so many olive trees and there's lots of olive oil. It's a little more expensive. He can say, I want to be machmir. What's machmir?
Stringent.
I want to be stringent. That's not saying that everything else is b'diavad. It's a little complicated.
Let's see the mitzvah of beautifying of
Yes, beautifying the mitzvah. Okay, well, let's make room here so we can. Continue. So we already said that there's the biblical level commandment, then there's a rabbinic level commandment, and then there's customs. Okay? And this is, of course, an increasing level of severity and obligation. Greater level of obligation, of course, is to do the biblical laws. A lesser level of severity is about the rabbinic laws, and a lesser level of obligation is for the customs. We lechatchila, we try to perform all levels, all of these three levels. So we have lechatchila. Lechatchila is the ideal performance, the ideal situation. We try to do it all. If we can't perform the halacha on the lechatchila level, we definitely try to do it on the b'diavad level. And then you could have, on top of the ideal performance, you could have a chumrah. Chumrah is a stringency where you want to make something even better than the best ideal performance. You take upon yourself something extra, stringency about how to perform it. And you could also have Kula is a leniency. You can be strict or lenient, and still be fulfilling the ideal performance. By definition, a b'diavad performance is a kula, because it's less than ideal, right? But you could still have something that is totally fulfilling your obligation, lechatchila, but you don't have to have every stringency involved. It's still considered lechatchila. Still something that's the proper fulfillment. And on top of that, you have an extra enhancement. That's an extra stringency. That's one way we can enhance the mitzvot. So even if you're not taking on every stringency, you're going to, instead of being stringent, you're going to be lenient. You can still be fulfilling the ideal way, mechatchila, ideal performance. It's still going to be considered ideal performance. You don't have to take on every stringency in the book to be considered to be the ideal performance. This is something I try to teach my children because they're such holy souls. They're so religious. At some points in their lives, they were looking for, I just want to do the best thing. Just want to do it in the best way. And I said to them, you're not going to be able to breathe if you try to take on every stringency from every different direction. You can be so stringent from every different direction that you are not able to do the next mitzvah, and do the next mitzvah, and do the next mitzvah. There's so many stringencies, and they're beautiful if it's the right time and place, if it's appropriate for you and for your level and for what you want to do. But if you try to do every stringency, it's almost impossible. It's always something more that you can do. Doesn't mean that if you don't take on the stringency, you're not keeping the halacha in the proper way. Okay, so that's a little bit of a fine point. We'll talk about it more, Be'ezrat Hashem. Number 35, Safek? Doubt. 36, Lechumra. It's the same words that we have on the board. The Chumra and Machmer is the same meaning. It means astringency. To be Machmer and is to be stringent, and Lechumra is part of a word structure which says you shall go to or choose the stringent. Right? We were using the phrase Safek Deoraita Lechumra. You should go towards, you should tend to be more stringent when it comes to biblical levels. The biblical level is the greatest level of obligation there is. So when we have a doubt, we're going to go Lechumra. We're going to choose to do stringency. But when it's a rabbinic level of obligation, if there's a question of doubt, you can go Lekula. You can be Mekel. Two different versions of the same word. And finally, Elu ve'elu develekim chayim. You have it on your pages. These and those are the words of the living God. Yafeh. Okay. Hananel and Yisrael. By tomorrow, I'm going to give you another test without your notes. And you're going to have to fill it in and get 100%. Okay, 90. How many did you get? 5 out of 39? That's about 80%. 40?
The bonus question.
So you got, who said the bonus is worth 5? Well done, well done. So most you did well, but you guys were not here. Hanana was not here. Israel came in late. Binyamin, how'd you do? 15. Okay, by tomorrow you'll be up to 30. Okay? Now you have the answers, you wrote them down? Very good. Let's take a look at the other side of this page. Let's take a look at the chart and we'll add some more terms. And by the end of our study today, you're going to have a new test on these terms as well. The 7 periods, but not so fast. We don't need to. You don't like tests, huh? If I could see you're not so excited about the testing thing. But who can tell me who were Chazal?
Sages.
Look at this side now. Do you have this? Do you have this? You can have it there. Anybody need one? Hananel, I gave you today. You have this? This side, just turn over the page, right? So turn over the page. What do you have? The Chazal are known as the sages. It's not just all sages. Some people, I had a student come over, a former student from 30 years ago, one of my first students. He came over a few weeks ago and he said, I want to bring you a present. I want to show you appreciation. And he wrote me a poem. And he says, to our wise sage. Called me a sage. Wow. I told you have sages in Africa, right? And the tribes have sages. Not in Judaism. When we say the sages, we say the Chachamim refers to a very short window in history. When? 0 to 500. Period number 4. The period of Chazal. This entire column. I column. This is the way it goes. Minus 1500 to 1000. Minus 1000 to 500. Minus 500 to 0. There's 0 to 500. Okay, so if you want to stress this, I would say, we have, who has a marker, like a yellow marker? A highlighter, yeah. Who's going to bring it to me first? So, there we go. Thank you. So to understand how Judaism works, what's the most important period? So it's hard to say that foundations is not the most important period. Because that's where we have Sinai, the Exodus, right? So, Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you can't beat them, right? But when we speak about the Jewish tradition, now, in year 2023, 5,783, really the most important for understanding Judaism is this period, the period of Chazal. Period number 4 is the most important. I would even stress that. As you can see, it's the central column of the 7 periods. 3 before and 3 after. Okay, is that clear? Let's talk a little bit about what happens in each of the periods. Israel, thank you very much. Good. Okay. Baseball. It's okay. Anyways. So, am I really a sage? I can't be. We only call Chachamim sages, Chazal, people who lived in this time period. From year 0 to 500. Not before and not after. Chazal are those rabbis who lived in this period. It's at the end of the Second Temple period. When was the Second Temple destroyed? Year. Which year? You should know this. No. When was the second temple destroyed? 70. Year 70. Year 70. It's not on your page, right? It doesn't say. It's not important. That's just a historical number. I thought you would know it. Year 70 is when the temple was destroyed. Sorry? I don't know. In terms of the Jewish years, I'm not sure. But I know in terms of the non-Jewish years that we use. Now we're in 2023. All the way back to almost 2,000 years ago. Year 70 is the year that, who destroyed the second temple? The Romans. Titus was the Roman general who came and burnt the temple in year 70. So that the Chazal started before that. Right? We say 0 to 500. And for hundreds of years after the destruction of the temple. The period of the sages is the period where Judaism became crystallized. All the laws that we're speaking about, all of the traditions, were all formulated and set down. At first it was oral, and then it was written during this period of 500 years. Is that clear? So Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, when we say Chazal say so, we're referring to this period 2,000 years old, or up to 1,500 years, whenever the... Why do we define it that way? Because what happened at the end of this period? The Talmud was written and sealed. It's actually closer to 600, some people say 700, but I'm giving you the rough period so that you understand the concept. That's what we spoke about, layered periods of authority. The authority of the sages, because they lived during this period, 0 to 500. You could say it started 100 years earlier. There were scholars which people would consider Chazal even before year 0. And there were Chazal even after year 500. But approximately, to give you the big picture, to understand that there was a certain period in history, this central period, where all of Judaism got defined for all time by the sages. Is that clear?
Can I, is there a way I to use this chart?
Sure, I've given it out before.
Oh, yeah,
it's a wonderful chart. Yeah. For now, one chart at a time. But you could share with the group, sure. Yeah.
When some book they say the stages. What do you mean by stages? The stages.
Exactly. That's what you have to understand. When you see in a Jewish book, in a Jewish Torah book, very good. You have it from before. When you see in a Jewish book, the sages say, they mean this period. It's not just our holy rabbis. They're good rabbis in all generations, but only these rabbis get called Chachamim, the sages. Now, because this period was so important, we even have additional names for them. Within the period of the sages gets divided up into 2. So we have 0 to 200. Those rabbis at that point, Tana, authors of the Mishnah. Shin and Taf switch, so it's almost Mitnaim, right? Mishnah comes from the Tanaim, and then year 200 to 500 are called Amoraim. That's on your page. You see it?
Yeah.
Those are called Chazal. Also, I don't know if it's on your page, but you could say from minus 100 to year 0, there's the Zugot, or the pairs. Is it on your page?
Yes.
It is?
זה קדם.
So these are all called Chazal, sages of blessed memory. Right? Chazal stands for Chachamim. Chacham, what does it mean, Chacham? Be a sage. Chacham is a sage. We add Zal, which stands for, you have it on your page, right? Does it translate it? The sages of blessed memory, Chachamim Zichronam Livracha, of blessed memory. In short, what do we call them? Chazal. The sages say it refers to either Tanaim or Amoraim or the Zugot also.
So the Babylonian and the Yerushalmi Talmud was written at this time.
Very good. So we said that continue to use the board. This was the time where all of the tradition gets crystallized. The oral tradition was oral. The written tradition, this was crystallized before that, in the period of the men of the Great Assembly. You can see it on your chart. In the third period of history, the Second Temple period. See that number 3? You see at the bottom of number 1, 2, and 3, what do we have? What's the literary result of period 1, 2, and 3? The literary result was the Tanakh. Right? The Tanakh is known as the written Torah. But then, the oral Torah, which always existed, the oral Torah was from Moshe Rabbeinu. It starts to get written down. Where does it get written down? It gets written down in a number of books. In this period of the Chazal. What are the books that are written? So the Amoraim wrote the Talmud. Excuse me. Another word for that is Gemara. It's easy to remember. You see Gemara, it sounds like Amorah. Amorah, Gemara. That's the later period. Before that, we have the Mishnah. The word Mishnah sounds like Tana. It's easy to remember. We have one other major type of work, of book, that gets written, collected in this time period. And that's, I'll put it over here because it refers, we have Midrash. Some Midrashim are from the time of the Mishnah, and some Midrash is from the time of the Gemara. But it's all Chazal. So we have 3 major types of literature: Midrash, Mishnah, and Gemara. You see it at the bottom of the middle column? Everybody see where over here? Chazal's works, Chazal's thoughts, Chazal's insights, commentaries, derivations, Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. All of their interpretations get recorded in 3 books. Three types of books: Midrash, Mishnah, and Gemara. The Talmud is the word we use for the Mishnah and the Gemara. So you could say by short, Midrash and Talmud. Talmud refers usually to the Mishnah and the Gemara. So when the sages say, you see in a book, the sages say X, Y, or Z. Hananel, you're reading a book on, here's a book on Shir HaShirim, the commentary. You have the text of the Tanakh up here, In the bottom, there's a commentary. He collects all sorts of ideas. He says, the sages say, right in the commentary, where are you going to look? 3 options. Where is it stated? It could be stated in the Midrash. The sages could be, their words could be written down in the Mishnah, and it could be written down in the Gemara. Those are 3 options. Midrash, Mishnah, Gemara. Sages only referring to this period. And there's, so we study, it's called, sometimes the sages are called the rabbis. The rabbis of the Talmudic era. The rabbis, so the study of the Talmudic era keeps us busy day and night. Study of Tanakh keeps us busy day and night. Where's the Tanakh? So we have, you could say, 2 focuses of major bodies of literature. This is called the written Torah, the literature that became known as the written Torah. And this literature, it's also written, but it's known as the oral Torah. It's the oral Torah that got written down. Torah shebichtav and Torah shebal peh. That's right. Torah shebal peh that got written down is in the period of the sages. Okay, what else do we have here? We have, you know what Tanaim and Amoraim are? Let's see what happened during that period. Let's start from the beginning. So Stephen, read column 4 from top to bottom. Column 4 from top to bottom.
The period of Khazar.
Yes.
Timeline 0 to 500.
Perfect.
Dominant powers, Roman Empire. Jewish event, the Great Revolt, destruction, Tisha B'Av, Bar Kokhba, revolt, diaspora.
Stop for a second. In terms of history, the Great Revolt resulted in the burning of the Jerusalem and the temple. The Jews didn't want the Romans to be in charge of the land of Israel. Who was in charge of the land of Israel before the Roman Empire? You have it on your page. Just before the Roman Empire, the Hasmoneans, which were Jews. We had Jewish reign. We had Jewish reign for about 200 years. Some form of autonomy, at least. It wasn't absolute. We weren't a superpower. But Roman influence became more and more oppressive. And the Jews didn't want to be under Roman rule. It's called the Great Revolt. They revolted against the Roman Empire, and they were too strong. What happened? They came and destroyed Jerusalem. Okay, we had no choice. The temple was destroyed. Jews still lived in the land of Israel. Those who were not sold into slavery, those who were not exiled, there was still a big Jewish community in the land of Israel under Roman rule for another 100 years, 60 years, until there was a group of Jews with a leader. Name of the leader who led, let's rebel again, we want our independence back. His name was Bar Kokhba, we call him Bar Kokhba. His name was Shimon Bar Koziva or Bar Kokhba. And he led the Jewish people. Just yesterday I saw a coin. It says on it, Shimon, the king from this period. Year 135 CE. Not 70, 135. So it's an additional 65 years later. And they had Jewish independence for a few years until the Romans were too strong. Again, they had to send the armies and put down the rebellion. They didn't allow the Jews to have independence. And then we suffered under the Roman rule, but for a while, there still was a viable Jewish community until it became too oppressive, and the community in Israel went into diaspora. That's what it says here, diaspora. They got spread all over the Middle East, eventually the entire world. But this was what was going on during the period of Chazal. Okay, so you can now read again the Jewish events, the major events.
The Jewish leadership and the stages of the blessed memory have come in, Zikrona Livraka, equal to Kazal. Tanaim, year 0 to 200, equal to stages of the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva. Amoraim.
Right, so what's Rabbi Akiva? It's just one example, it's just one name. Of each group, I gave one example, so you should know. Rabbi Akiva is the classic, perhaps the most famous of the Tanaim. He lived during and was a big supporter of Bar Kochba. So you already know when he lived, 135. Does that fit? What time period is that? 0 to 100, right? He's one of the Tanaim. Rabbi Akiva was a Tana. Singular is Tana. He was a Tana. And his words are all over the Mishnah and the Midrash. Okay, continue.
Amoraim, years 200 to 500. The stages of the Gemara. For example, Abaye.
So here, going back to your question, Eov. The Mishnah was written in Eretz Yisrael. Only during the Amoraic period, here we have two. We have Eretz Yisrael and Babylon. We have two centers of study. So we have a Jerusalem Talmud and a Babylonian Talmud. Okay? The Talmud, this is what Hanana was asking me about before. Only in the period of the Amoraim do we have the Talmud. And here, as we were describing, under the Roman Empire, Jewish scholarship could not continue. And so essentially this ended, whereas the Babylonian Talmud continued to be written and developed even after year 500, 600, 700, and even more. The Jewish community in Babylon was the center of Jewish learning and tradition after the period of the sages. So the Talmud Bavli is, it's not even on the page I see here. There's no Bavli in Yerushalmi. But there is, it does say Babylonian and Jerusalem. Okay, so why don't you, so the Amoraim are the sages. Abaye, in the brackets, he was an example of an Amora from Babylon. There's 5 generations of Amoraim. Abaye was from the 4th generation of Amoraim, around year 400. Yeah?
Abaye is
a name of a person. It's a name of a person. Yeah. You haven't studied much Gemara, so you've never heard the name before, but you should know the name of the greatest sages. We study their works day and night. Not only Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. They were all around in the time of the revolt against the Romans. They were all Tanaim. There's also Amoraim. Amoraim who lived in Eretz Yisrael. I could bring one example of an Amora who lived in Babylon, because it became more central. Abaye perhaps is known as the central figure of the Talmud Bavli. That's why I wrote him down here. But yeah, that's his name. Yeah, that was his nickname, by the way. He actually had a proper name. His name was Abba, I think. Sorry.
This period, the Jews, this period.
So there's 2 exiles, as you know, right? after the first temple, the first temple was destroyed. You can see it says here, exile, in period number 2. The second column, you see the exile? Where did the Jews go to? But it's plural, there's 2 exiles. Because we had 12 tribes, 10 of them went to the Philippines, and India, and China, and Africa. We don't know where the 10 tribes went, to put it bluntly. But then there was 2 tribes. 2 tribes, Yehuda and Benjamin, primarily they went to Babylon. For how long? How long was the exile for in Babylon? After the first temple. We see they went back and built the second temple. The prophet came and said to him, you're going to be in exile for 70 years. And it's true, after 70 years, they came back.
Only Benjamin
And Yehuda.
only.
Yeah, only those 2 out of the 12. The rest of the Jewish people were lost until today. Maybe there's some of them, some of their descendants are here in this room. Who knows?
In Amazon.
Maybe. They could be anywhere. But what became known as the Jewish people came from Judah. Yehuda, Jew. Jew comes from Judah. So the Jewish people came back and rebuilt the second temple. That's period number 3. You see that, Hananel? We're going to the third column now. What year? Year minus 586 is when the second temple, the first temple was destroyed. And so 70 years later, minus 516 was the beginning of the second temple. It lasted for about 500 years, a little more, till year 70. That's what I told you before. But the Jews were not exiled in year 70. Some were. The Jewish community remained the period of the sages. They remained in the land of Israel for 500 years under Roman rule. It's not an exile, really. Only at the end of that period, the community in Israel was not viable any longer, and the center of the Jewish people moved to Babylon. And Jews were dispersed throughout the world. But the center became Babylon. After the period of the sages, after the period of the Tanaim, really. Already in the period of the Amoraim, the Babylonian Talmud became more central. But they were both viable, but pretty much at the end of the period of the sages, there was no more viable community in the land of Israel for hundreds of years. Even 1,000 years. Not until 19th century. Okay, in the 16th century, there was a community in the land of Israel, but it wasn't as centralized as it was in the period of the sages. So really, the period of the sages is the last time we had a strong Jewish community with all the scholarship being in the land of Israel, like the period of the sages. Okay? What are you reading for us now? The bottom of the column. Stevens, continue reading this section, which we just talked about.
The Jewish literature, oral Torah written down and developed, is Mishnah, organized by the book of Tanakh. Babylonian and Jerusalem, Talmud, organized in the 6th century, which is categories or topic in Mishnah and Gemara.
Okay. Questions? Now, today we learned a little bit more about the period of the sages. Who can give me an example of what it says in the Talmud about about certain laws. In the Talmud, this is what we had on the board before. It becomes very clear that there are biblical levels of mitzvot and rabbinic mitzvot, and then customs. That there's a lechatchila, an ideal way of performing the mitzvot, and there's also something which is kosher b'di'evet, after the fact, or less than ideal performance. All these are definitions which come from the Talmud. And you know what? Something amazing happened, and I'll conclude with this because we'll have to continue this tomorrow. When the Talmud was concluded, even the sages in Babylon, they pretty much sealed the work. The discussions were done. The Talmud, the Gemara, in some way, is a commentary on the Mishnah, right? It's developing, explaining the Mishnah. That period was over. Jewish people were scattered everywhere. They needed to know what to do. If they didn't have most of the rabbis were where? Where were most of the rabbis? In Babylon, right? They were the descendants of the great community where they wrote the Babylonian Talmud in Babylon. So if you were living in Spain and you had a question for a rabbi, where was the great rabbi? In Babylon. If you were living in Europe, by this time Jews were already living in Europe. The Romans exiled them to Rome. Many of the Jews were living in Rome. There was a Jewish community. And they had a question. They couldn't ask the local leader. They didn't have great scholars. Most of the great scholars were in Babylon. So they sent questions to the Babylonian scholars. So the period after the period of the sages became known by the Babylonian rabbis. Babylonian rabbis became known by the leadership. There were two leaders of the Babylonian community. One leader was called the Gaon, and one leader was called Reish Galuta, the head of the exile. These were officially appointed positions at the head of the Jewish community in Babylon. And period number 5, period after the sages, is usually known as the period of the Gaonim, or Babylonian rabbis. And they were the central authority for all the Jews. You know, amazing thing is that the Talmud, after it got sealed, it was sent all around the world. Manuscript, of course. Printing press was not created yet. Manuscripts of the Talmud went everywhere. And all the Jewish people accepted the Talmud as the book of Judaism. 2 books of Judaism. We have the Tanakh and we have the Talmud, which is based on the Midrash. So the Midrash gets thrown in there. But the Talmud was the central work of Judaism. But it was very hard to interpret. So this Talmud was everywhere, but to get guidance, how to interpret the Talmud, people will turn to the Gaonim. But the major thing to understand is that Chazal were accepted by all the Jewish people everywhere as the final authorities on Judaism. And if you want to live your Judaism in year 800 or year 900, where are you going to look? Right, 800 and 900, you're in period 5. You're going to go look back and try to figure out what the sages said about this topic. The sages in the Talmud. So this Talmud spread everywhere, and everybody realized, okay, the Talmud is our new book of Judaism. So we have to study the Talmud. And the Jews studied the Talmud everywhere. And if they had questions, they sent the question to the Gaonim. But the new authoritative description of what Judaism has to say about the world, about life, not only about halakha, also about ethics and all the traditions were passed down about history, the beliefs, all that was defined and crystallized in the words of the sages. The words of the sages, I don't want to use the word gospel. They became the truth of Judaism. Now what's amazing, we're going to talk about it more tomorrow, is that of course there are differences of opinion. There was machloket among the sages. The Talmud is not a monolithic work with only one opinion. There's many different opinions. And here we get the principle of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. All the different opinions among the sages are all considered to be these and those are the words of the living God. To be continued tomorrow, we'll continue to understand. But what we said today is so critical for you to understand that the period of the sages is really the final restatement of Judaism after the period of the Tanakh, period of the sages. They define it for us. Okay, we'll stop here.